This is the Honest Brew Podcast. Here's your host, Ben Heisler.
It's your birthday today. What does that mean? I guess I'll try to explain that years ago on this day, it was the first time your parents saw your beautiful face.
Welcome in, everybody. It is episode 19 here on the Honest Brew Podcast. Ben Heisler with you, and that song was the birthday song. It was sung by John LaJoie from the League. And part of the reason that we wanted to play it today is because of our guest, Paul Scheer, one of the stars of the comedy The League, which is on FX, is going to join us in just a few minutes. And season 4 premieres next Thursday, which is October 11th. I guess it's not next Thursday. It's a week from next Thursday. It's October 11th, 10:30 p.m. East Coast time, and it's season number 4. And if you haven't had an opportunity to watch The League yet, please go ahead and do so. One of the funniest shows and one of the most well-written shows on TV. And what I'm curious to know is how much of it is pure script and how much is very similar to, say, Curb Your Enthusiasm, because the co-creator of the show, Jeff Schaffer, also was one of the lead writers and producers of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is another one of my favorite all-time programs. And what makes that show great is you have a lot of great writers and comedians and actors there that are going by an outline. They're not taking a script and saying everything word for word. They're taking an idea and they have some suggested dialogue and pieces, and they say you can use this, but maybe you can, if you want to improvise, you can do that too. And it's really, really cool how everything goes together. And The League feels so authentic in their dialogue that I wonder whether or not that's actually the case. So Paul Scheer is going to join us. And really, if you haven't seen him in The League, he's also on the Adult Swim comedy, NTSF SD SUV. He does a podcast called How Did This Get Made? Which basically just dissects and breaks down some of just the worst movies of all time. So we'll ask him about those projects. And where I first heard about him was on the MTV show The Human Giant, where he was with Aziz Ansari, Rob Hubel, and you can also follow him on Twitter at Paul Scheer. So that's coming up in just a minute. But before we get to Paul, if you want to get more information about The Honest Brew, you can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Honest Brew. That's where we are hosting all of our shows for the foreseeable future. If you want to tweet at us, you can tweet at The Honest Brew, and you can tweet at me at Benny Heis. And again, back to facebook.com. Please like us on the page. And then also on iTunes, if you do listen to the show, please rate and review us. Okay, very excited to welcome in our guest this week. He is one of the stars of the comedy The League on FX, and that premieres on Thursday, October 11th, at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time for its 4th season. I can't believe it's gotten to the 4th season already. And if you haven't had an opportunity to watch it yet, you're missing out. It's not just a fantasy football show. It's a great, great comedy. He's also the creator, executive producer, and star of the Adult Swim comedy, NTSF SD SUV. You can also check out his podcast, How Did This Get Made?, which is available on earwolf.com. And in case you haven't seen any of these fine programs and you remember the name from the past and maybe been, I don't know, living under a rock or a tanning bed or something like that, he was also one of the stars of The Human Giant. You can follow him on Twitter at Paul Scheer, and he joins us now on The Honest Brew. Hi, Paul.
Hey, what's going on? I feel like I cannot live up to that introduction. I sound much more interesting than I actually am.
No, you know what? I think you can actually live up a little bit because everything that you've done, man, everything you've touched is hysterical. And it's
you're
really,
very nice to say it. Thank you.
It's really a credit to not only just a lot of the creative ways that you've gone about, but man, you keep yourself busy with all of these different shows, all of these different opportunities. Have you found a minute or two just to sit back, relax, and actually play a little fantasy football?
I have been playing fantasy football, and this season has been a rocky season. I drafted really, really well, and I'm just making some bonehead moves. Like I had Tom Brady, and I have RG3, and I played RG3 this week. I was like, you know what? I'm going to start him for once, and he doesn't do as good as Tom. I feel like I'm making all these bad little moves this season. Last season I was golden. This season I'm taking a little bit of a hit the first couple of weeks.
So you're headed towards the Sacco of your league?
I am. I'm heading right to the middle. That's pretty much where it looks like. Okay. I'm not the bad. I'm not the worst. I'm just middle, which is no fun.
Right.
When you're in the middle, it's just sort of like you win a week, you lose a week, you win a week, you lose a week. It's not I'd rather be at the end, at the bottom, or the top.
Just searching
I don't like this middle
Just
stuff.
searching for a little bit more drama. I hear you, though. I was one of the guys that left Brian Hartline on the bench this week.
Oh, wow.
It's not like, a Tom Brady RG3, but he goes and lights it up for about 36 points, and I'm left just banging my head against the wall because it could have been a deciding factor. But I'm glad that you've joined us, Paul. It's great to have you on The Honest Brew. And really, first of all, congratulations on 4 seasons of the league, which is a terrific show. I guess at one point, did Jeff and Jackie Schaefer, who were the producers and creators of the show, along with you and Nick, Mark, John, Stephen, the rest of the cast and crew, when did you guys realize that not only was this show working, but that this show would stick for a long time?
It's funny. I've been lucky to do like some really cool different projects, and and this is the one that I felt like once it got on Netflix, it opened up an entirely different audience. Because I think originally people were a little turned off to it that weren't into fantasy football. Like people were like, oh, it's a fantasy football show. I don't know anything about that. Even me, when I started the show, I wasn't into fantasy football at all. I watched football. I was a fan, but I never did fantasy. I was like, I don't even want to audition for this show. I don't know anything about fantasy football. And I feel like once people have found it on Netflix, they're like, oh, it's not just about fantasy football. And that's been a really good thing to open up our audience. And now, like in the 4th year, it's been crazy. But I really owe a lot of that to Netflix. Like people will take a chance on it on Netflix more than they did when we originally aired.
You know what? That's interesting too, because I started to see that progression. I think after season 1, you started to see a little bit more character development and more about the characters themselves than the actual league that they're in. They take the draft, when they had Chad Ochocinco on, you still had the elements of the fantasy football league, but you really started to learn more about the characters and have a lot more fun. Was that intentional after season 1, where you started to see a little bit more from the characters and less about the league?
Well, I think season 1 was only 6 episodes. So I feel like we were just kind of establishing ourselves. And, I would say like most TV shows in the first 6 episodes are still finding its footing. It's like, who are these characters? How do we play with each other? Because, those scripts were written primarily before we had even met as a cast. So, it was interesting. We didn't know how it all fit. And then the second season, Nick Kroll and I wrote 2 episodes in the second season. Obviously, Jeff and Jackie know how the cast interacts, and I think everything just kind of blossoms a little bit. Even though it's a season for us, like most TV shows, they'll do like 24 episodes in a season, so you don't even remember the first 6. So we almost did, even though it's 2 seasons, it was really just like our first 18 episodes. Like really kind of changed.
Yeah, and what a lot of people also don't know about Jeff Schaefer and Jackie Marcus Schaefer is that Jeff wrote for Seinfeld, and he also written and co-produced the last few seasons of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. And one of the staples of that show is the writing, because it's very natural and authentic coming from the actors. It's because it's actually not scripted. There's an outline to get from point A to point B. There's a lot of really talented comedians and actors on this show, on the league. And how much of that sort of going from this outline and maybe going off script is there on your show? Because at any time you have the ability to get a lot of creative, funny people involved, and I'm sure it would be easy a lot of the times to go in that direction.
Well, yeah, our show is set up exactly the same way as Curb. We have an outline. It's about a 12-page outline, and and then for the most part, I would say 90% of the dialogue is improvised. In the outline, as I've written the episodes too, like you write suggestions of dialogue, suggestions of jokes, things like that. Yeah. But then, the cast really gets to blow out the characters, really find a lot of the stuff in it. And, for my character too, a lot of it comes in the choice of like wardrobe. Like we have an amazing wardrobe person, and she puts together amazing things that kind of take scenes and detours that we would never have seen on the page because we don't know what it is until we see what I'm wearing.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the wardrobe, because your character in particular, Andre, is very ever-changing. He's a successful, wealthy plastic surgeon in Chicago, but I mean, he's still the guy that everybody gives a ton of shit to in the group because he tries way too hard to fit in, to be cool, and that's part of what makes the character so damn funny. Andre will spend 3 days in London, and he'll be convinced that he's an English gentleman, and he'll try and portray that to everybody. He'll wear glasses to appear smart, but he'll end up looking like someone Chris Hansen would just look at and go, jackpot. What do you enjoy most about Andre the character, and I guess where would you like to see him go as the show continues?
Well, look, I mean, it's really funny. I think everyone has like an Andre, if not in their league, in their life, which is just the guy or girl who just tries a little bit too hard, probably not nailing it in the relationship area either. And I feel like, to me, I think the most important thing that keeps the character, I feel so like highfalutin talking about the character, but what's so interesting to me is that like these guys are really friends. And like, even though they're really nasty to Andre or they make fun of Andre, there's like a love there. And also with Andre, I feel like it's fun to see him kind of bounce back. For me, I would love to see like Andre in a relationship and see what that kind of brings to the table. Because I feel like we've done like him getting involved in like cooking and molecular gastronomy
mixology,
and drinks and all that sort of stuff. So now I'd like to see like what that attitude brings if it gets into a relationship. We saw a little bit of it with Shiva in the first season, and so to me it's just about finding more ways to kind of just do stuff with that character. Because every time we give him a different thing to like hold on to, it's fun to see where it goes.
No question. We're talking to Paul Scheer from the league here on the Honest Brew podcast. Well, the cast itself, it's you and Nick Kroll and Mark, Steven, John LaJoie, just really fucking funny people. And the chemistry, you've seen that go on from season 2, season 3. Have you guys worked together before? Was casting done by Jeff and Jackie? Was it FX? And one thing that I'm very curious about is because so much of this is, as you said, there's a lot of improv involved based on the outline. Who out of all of you, I guess, has the ability, any given shooting, to just make somebody laugh so hard that they may or may not crap their pants?
Well, there's a bunch of questions there, so I'll kind of tackle them all at once.
Okay.
Let's see. So FX has a very interesting way of doing things. I think it's been highly publicized with Louis, which is they give a very small amount of money to a half-an-hour show, and they go, do whatever you want. If it succeeds, then you're a genius, and we're a genius for hiring you. And if it fails, you're not a genius, and we gave you a shot. So I feel like they really give you just enough rope to hang yourself. So They don't get involved in the casting. They don't get overly noting on the scripts. They just kind of sit there almost like a father who believes in you and just kind of says, nope, we trust your instincts. Do your thing. And so it allowed Jeff and Jackie to cast us. And they did a great job, I think. I mean, pulling us all together. Like I said, I didn't want to audition for the show. Even after I had met with Jeff and Jackie, I had met with them and they said, we have a secret show we can't tell you what it's about, but it's going to be a cool show. They didn't want anyone to know they were doing a fantasy football show.
Okay.
And when I finally found out it was fantasy football, I was like, oh, I can't improvise like stats and stuff like that. And my friend Nick, who plays Ruxo on the show, we've been friends for a long time and worked together for years. He even hired my improv group back in New York City to come to perform at his college when he was a senior, and I just had gotten out of school. So we go back way. We go back a long time. So I kind of called up Nick, and he was like, dude, you don't have to know that much about fantasy football. You should come in. And I came in at literally the last possible second. They weren't even holding auditions anymore, and I got the part, which is really exciting and cool. So Nick was the only guy I knew before that.
Okay.
Steve obviously is in the stand-up world. John LaJoie, it was from Canada and was doing his own thing. Mark and Katie came from the independent film world. So we all were kind of strangers to each other, but we all had an idea of how to improvise, not the same idea. And so when we came to set, I think it was fun to see, like, oh, you improvise like that, you improvise like that, you improvise like that. As far as, like, people laughing, I think we all crack each other up. And I think given the moment, we can all make each other break. I think Nick is definitely the one that breaks the easiest. And I think the guy who gets the most, like, people to break consistently is Jason Mantzoukas as Rafi. I mean, Rafi is essentially like this cartoon character that we unleashed into our world. Like, our world is pretty normal Chicago suburban, and Rafi came in and just, he has a knife. He's insane. He's the only one of us that is like a pure id. I don't know where he lives. I don't know what he does. Has he killed people? He could have. So I feel like Rafi is probably the guy who comes in and really just can explode a scene with just absolute insanity.
Jason was a lot of fun. I remember when he first came in, and I wasn't sure initially how to think of him, but now that he's sort of gotten more and more involved in the show, I think the way that you guys have used him a little bit sparingly from here and there, that almost makes his character funny, because if you use him every episode, maybe that type of aggressiveness and craziness from his character, from Rafi, might almost be a little too much.
I totally agree. I feel like Rafi in small doses really works, only because our show is grounded, even though it's not like, it's, we are all functioning adults. We do things that are dumb and stuff like that, but we are in a realistic world. And once you throw in a guy who's like saying he's getting arrested and has knife fights, it kind of just ekes the reality out a little bit. So I think Jeff and Jackie's done a great job at like making him this great character that kind of revolves around our world. We're not really in his world.
Right. Well, one final question from me regarding the league, because I still want to get to your other shows and your podcast. So there's so much to talk to you about. I was thinking about my all-time favorite episodes, and I still think that when I finally pare it down, it's still the finale to season 1 with the Shiva Bowl. We see Shiva all grown up. She's gorgeous. She re-enters everybody in the league's lives. It's up there with Mr. McGiblets, Krav Maga, the Klumberg. Those are a couple other my favorites. Where did the concept, the idea, the actual Shiva come from? And I guess the second part to that question is, whose brilliant idea was it for the Shiva Blast and also Shiva Nagila?
Well, the truth of this is it's very much rooted in Jeff Schaefer's own life.
That's awesome.
I think he's talked about this a few times. There was a girl, and I believe her name was Shiva Kamini Soma. It's almost, if you said it, almost identical to how our Shiva's name is. They use her on his actual trophy. This is like very much based in Jeff's life. So there is a real Shiva. There is a Shiva on a trophy. Jeff in high school used to Shiva blast with his friends, and I believe the Shiva dance, the Shiva Nagila, I think was also a part of that. So that is 100% ripped from the life of Jeff Schaefer, with almost shockingly little it's not super hidden. It wasn't like there was a girl named Beth and we named her Shiva. I believe the girl's name was Shiva. I'm almost 100% positive about that.
It's almost too good that it has to be true in that sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Question from one of our Twitter followers, at DanCorell15. He has a question for you, Paul, and he wants to know who thought of all the team names in the league's fantasy football league, and which one is your favorite, and he hopes it's not the double entendres.
The double entendres was the name that was kind of assigned to me when we first came into the show. And then as the show kind of progressed, I think I started throwing out different ones. I think I had the James Bondres. I think I had like a Harry Potter one. I can't remember which one that was. And then someone on Twitter brought it to my attention, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I told Jeff and Jackie about it, and it is in the show this season. A new Twitter, I guess I can't reveal it, but there's a name that Andre adopts this season, and it was definitely suggested by multiple people on Twitter, and I think it's great.
Oh,
I really like it. You'll see it mid-season.
We'll have to stay tuned for that. Well, you're also a very busy human being, as I noted earlier. You have a significant role in NTSF SD SUV, which stands for National Terrorism Strike Force San Diego Sport Utility Vehicle. That's on Adult Swim on Cartoon Network. You create it, you're the executive producer, and you play Agent Trent Hauser. It's a great cast. June Diane Raphael is a part of it, Rebecca Romaine, Rob Riggle. How did you end up putting together this show? What inspired the longest abbreviation of all time on television?
I was a writer on Children's Hospital, and I was a performer on Children's Hospital, which is another show on Adult Swim. And I really fell in love with this idea of doing a 15-minute show. it was like so much fun to do it. And I was like, oh man, I would love to do this as well. And I had this idea in the back of my head for doing like an action comedy. Basically because I was like, oh, who will cast me in an action movie? No one. But if I do it as a comedy, I can get to do all that cool stuff that I want to do, and it'll all work. I get to wear a wig. I get to, act like Jack Bauer and David Crusoe had a baby while Jerry Bruckheimer watched in a corner smoking a cigarette. And, and so that show has been really, really fun. And, I come from my background, with doing Human Giant and a few other different things. Like I always try to create my own shows, and the league only shoots 50 days out of the entire year. So it gives me a lot of free time to do other things. And it's been so great being on Adult Swim, because Adult Swim has the same mentality as FX. Give you guys a little bit of money. The ratings are amazing, and you get to really do whatever you want. And we've been so lucky with the show because I get to basically work with everybody that I want to, all my friends, like Rob Riggle and I've been close friends with Martin Starr, and then just bringing in people that you know from TV and movies. Like we have Ray Liotta on the season, Max Greenfield from New Girl, and Mike, the guy who played the dad in Family Ties, Ed Helms and Ellie Kemper, and the list kind of just goes on and on. Aziz Ansari and Rob Hubel. Like we just are able to cast all of our friends, and everyone just comes in and has a blast doing it because it's a quick, fun shoot. We shoot that whole season in 13 episodes in 20 days.
One other project that you're working on, and I do want to ask you a question about the Human Giant as well, since you brought it up, the How Did This Get Made podcast, and that's available on earwolf.com. It's you, June Diane Raphael, Jason Mantzoukas, who, as we talked about, is Rafi on the league. And you guys take an awful movie, you dissect it, but it's almost like a movie that's so bad it's amazing. And that's sort of how you describe it. And you referenced Old Dogs, and Nick Kroll was on an episode with you guys when you talked about Burlesque. When did this show come about? And I'm wondering when Good Guys Wear Black with Chuck Norris from 1978, if that'll ever get a mention on the How Did This Get Made podcast, because I believe that deserves to be right up there.
I got to do a little research on my Chuck Norris. I am a big fan of podcasts. I grew up listening to Howard Stern. I still do, and I just love radio. And when the podcast revolution kind of came out, everyone had a podcast, and I wanted to do something different than what I saw being done, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And one night I was just railing on Wall Street 2, Money Never Sleeps, and I was with June because we had seen it together, and we were talking to Jason. And I said, man, this movie, I just went off on it for like 15 minutes. And Jason's like, that's a podcast. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, you should do that as a podcast. I was like, well, only if you guys do it with me. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So it was kind of born out of that. We would just go see movies. And then when we first started, it was movies in the theater, and we just kind of talk about them. And then, what we started running into was the idea that, some of these movies in the theater are just bad. They're not fun bad. And then we started breaking it out a little bit and getting to go, into the well and finding these good bad movies and just starting to talk about that. Now we're almost about 50 episodes in. We've been doing it for over a year, and we won the best comedy podcast award from LA Weekly, and iTunes said we were the best new comedy podcast. And so it's been great, the reception we've gotten. We've gotten some amazing people to come on and talk about their movies. We had Vanilla Ice talk about Cool as Ice, and
that's awesome.
Kevin Smith came on to talk about working on Wild Wild West, and Adam Scott came on, not to talk about his movie, but he talked about Fast Five, which we love. And also the directors of Crank 1 and 2 came on, because we love Crank 1 and 2. It's insane, but we love it. And they also came on, and we talked to them. So the podcast has been really fun to kind of examine these bad movies, like Barbed Wire and stuff like that. And now we get a chance to sometimes actually talk to the people involved in the movies.
That's really cool.
It's fun.
And then that's really cool that they're willing to come on, and they can take the joke, and they can feel comfortable enough to be like, okay, yeah, this is where our movie eventually ended up going. We might as well have fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, we've all been involved in things that kind of suck. I mean, I have, June has, and Jason has. And your intention isn't that it's going to suck, but
right.
Sometimes it does. And so and if it's fun to watch, you can hear good stories about it. I mean, one of my favorite episodes was talking to one of the actors in the movie The Room, which is a classic bad movie, the Tommy Wiseau movie The Room. And his stories from behind set were amazing. They were really, really great.
I remember there's a Patton Oswalt stand-up routine where he's talking about an actual movie, and I think it was called Deathbed, the bed that eats
the
people.
The bed who eats people or something like that?
Yes.
Is that it?
Was that an actual movie? Have you guys been able to find an opportunity to dissect that?
You know, we try for the most part to stay with like what we call 4-quadrant movies, which are like movies that are made to appeal to the broadest grouping of people.
Okay.
Like you can bring old people, young people, couples, guys, girls, because we find those are the funniest movies that get the most beat up. It's sort of like too many people weigh in. And, you know, with a movie like, a movie that is a little bit more cheesy, like, Gary Busey and Gingerbread Man, while that might be really fun to watch, there was never a chance of it being good. We kind of really enjoy, we enjoy a movie where people put a significant amount of money in it. It was like, we're launching a franchise. We're continuing a franchise. Like, it's sort of like when you have everything at your disposal and it still turns out bad, that's the ones that we're most interested in.
I'm glad that we were able to get Gary Busey a mention on this show today, because I think anytime you can go an episode and get his name, and I think you feel very good. I have a question about The Human Giant, because I wasn't aware of it until it also was on Netflix and DVD, and my brother, Andrew, actually was the one who told me about it, and then I started watching more and more, and it was fantastic. I want to go back to one episode, or one of the sketches with the jingles, with you and Rob and Aziz. Where did that idea come from, as far as just, were there jingles that were stuck in your head one day and that decided, what, maybe we should turn this into a 3-minute sketch? Or were you whistling jingles that didn't exist? How exactly did that particular episode come about? There was that, and there was also the To Catch a Predator spoof with Aziz as the baby, and that one still cracks me up to this day.
Well, it's funny because, our show, we ran for 2 seasons. Unfortunately, the second season is not out on Netflix or available on DVD or even on iTunes, which is a real bummer.
Yeah.
We're trying to get it out there. They offer, basically, I think MTV is a little bit mad at us because they offered us a third season and we walked away after 2.
Okay.
And so we have not, but I think eventually we have to release the full box set of Human Giant. But you can find a lot of the stuff on our old YouTube page. Commercial jingles, we were very lucky in the whole development of the show. We brought in writers, amazing writers from all walks of life. I mean, Patton Oswalt, Brian Posehn, Nick Swartzen, Nick Kroll.
Yeah.
We brought in everybody that we could possibly bring in, and they would just pitch ideas, and we would kind of work with them. And that commercial jingles idea was actually an idea written by John Glazer, who you might know from Conan O'Brien.
Sure.
He's on the show Delocated, also an Adult Swim show where he wears a ski mask the entire time. Super funny guy. And he had this idea, and we then kind of ran with it. The actual Doritos song that I sang was improvised. We had a one that was in the script, but then I just improvised it there, and we were afraid that we couldn't get Doritos. So I believe on the DVD, there's just variations of me singing a Doritos-esque song with like a pineapple and a thing of milk and a bunch of different things. But that was a John idea. To Catch a Predator was an idea that we all came up with amongst ourselves. At that point, that show was really popular, and we loved John Benjamin, and we just thought that John Benjamin, super funny writer, actor, you know him from Archer and stuff like that. He would just be really funny as this creepy guy, and I don't remember exactly how that sketch was fully written, but it was just kind of like perfect casting, and we just kind of brought it all around. And that another one of my favorite sketches. Both of those super fun. We actually just found out that that Vince Gilligan, who is the creator of Breaking Bad, is a huge fan of Human Giant, and he was just saying on a podcast that he shows his writers this one sketch called Lunar Ticks all the time, and Lunar Ticks is just basically a game show on the moon where astronauts kill unsuspecting people, and it was sponsored by Quiznos. And we actually got Quiznos to pay us money for sponsorship, and we were killing people with Subway sandwiches. So that was amazing.
It was one of my favorites, and just being able to watch some of the old YouTube clips. I remember the Chris Angel spoof as well.
That was actually one of the sketches that got Aziz and I the show. We did a character called the Illusionators, and that was also at the time that Chris Angel was really hot. And, so that was really a lot of fun.
I have one final question. And again, Paul Scheer from the league, kind enough to join us here on the Honest Brew. I'm a proud Chicagoan, and a couple of years ago, I remember when the league toured, and you guys did the show at the House of Blues. Are there any plans to do something similar like that again, or based on the popularity of the show, there's really no need to go out and try and showcase the show from that vantage point anymore because it has been so successful?
Well, I think that part of it was just kind of getting out and interacting with the fans. This Wednesday, I don't know when this podcast drops, but this Wednesday we'll be announcing a couple tour dates. I think we like to go out. Like last year we went out a lot. And, that first year I think we were just kind of finding our feet, and just kind of going out there and just trying to figure out what this could be, as a live show. And, it's something that I think we like to do. So it's, and if we can get a couple in, we'll do them, but I will say that if you like Texas, you might be in store for a treat. The league will be coming to Texas. I can't say where, but that I know for sure we're announcing tomorrow. So this is an exclusive to your podcast. It will be somewhere in Texas, and it will be announced tomorrow on the FX Twitter page, which is the League FX.
That is awesome. So can we tweet this, or should we hold off and make people listen to get that information?
I would say make people listen because I might get in trouble for even saying that. I know that we're very protective of things. Hopefully this is just a small, you get the, people get it. But tomorrow morning, it's free game.
Little bit of scoop. All right, I lied. I do have one final question for you, and it goes back to Jeff Schaefer, and I'm wondering if you have any inside information from Jeff as to whether or not there's going to be another season of Curb.
Of Curb?
Yes.
Right now they're in the middle of shooting the Curb movie, which is going to be on HBO, and it has amazing people like John Hamm and Bill Hader and Michael Keaton and Kate Hudson. And it's not Larry David is not playing Larry David. He's playing another character, but the cast is just phenomenal, and they're shooting right now. Greg Mottola, the guy who directed Superbad, is doing that right now.
Oh, he's great. That
will be on HBO soon. I imagine the next 6 to 7 months, and I think that Larry's a very he's a proactive guy. He does a lot of stuff, and I think if Larry wants to do another season of Curb, he'll do another season of Curb. I think he really wanted to. This is me talking basically what I think. I think that Larry just wanted to do this movie and try something different than just doing another season of Curb. So maybe now that he gets that out of the system, he'll go back. But I don't think it's the end of Larry David performing by any means.
Well, let's hope not. And again, you can follow Paul Scheer at Paul Scheer on Twitter. One of the stars of the comedy The League. He plays Andre. You can also catch him on Adult Swim at NTSF, SDSUV. Also, please listen to his podcast, How Did This Get Made? It is award-winning on iTunes and also available on earwolf.com. Paul, this has been just a pleasure and a lot of fun, and I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Paul Scheer from The League on FX, and again, that premieres on Thursday, October 11th at 10:30 p.m. East Coast time, and it will be in its 4th season, and it has gotten increasingly funnier as the seasons have gone on, so please do tune in for that. And we appreciate Paul for joining us here today. Possibly one more show again this week, the end of the baseball season. The regular season is coming and the playoffs are beginning towards the end of the week. So we may talk some baseball and also a possible surprise visitor along the way. But thank you all for listening once again. My name is Ben Heisler, and I appreciate everybody tuning in for this week's edition of the Honest Brew Brewcast. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.